Peace. Thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome to Queen LLC. This is Queen L. So today's video is regarding Astrology 101. And the topic for today is regarding when you do not have planets within a house in your natal chart. So pull your natal chart. That's the first thing to do. And like I mentioned in a previous video, I believe my most recent video with regard to Neptune retrograde, which I'll link above if you haven't checked that out. But what I mentioned was the fact that some people may say, oh, I don't have Pisces in my chart. It's usually specific to zodiac signs. I don't have that sign in my chart. And the reason why someone may think that is because, one, they have either looked at one of the astrology apps and did not see that particular house or zodiac sign listed in their list of alignments, or they have pulled their natal chart using a resource online that only showed where planets were aligned to houses. And if you have, let's say, multiple planets in certain houses, then you will obviously have houses that don't have planets in them. And essentially, we all have at least two that do not have planets in them. And that's because when we're talking about what I consider the big 10 planets, being the sun, the moon, so these are planetary bodies, the sun, the moon, and the 8 planets, including Pluto, that are in our solar system aside from Earth. So those 10, and then we have 12 houses in the natal chart, so then that would leave at least 2. And odds are that you don't have one of those planetary bodies solo in each house. So you will most likely have more than 2. And that is something I will touch on in a future video with regard to patterns that astrologers pay attention to and that have meaning with regard to where there are specific clusters of planets in certain parts of our chart, which quadrant, which hemisphere has the most planets, etc. It all means something. So I will talk about that in a future video. However, if you have noticed that you are missing planets in certain houses and you're wondering why, because we talk about, the energy of the planets and the energy that it's giving off to you depending on what house that planet is in, then one could assume, well, if I don't have a planet within a specific house, does that mean I'm not getting any energy there? Don't I need energy, right? Not necessarily. So I will tell you that there are some astrologers, specifically in Vedic or Eastern astrology, that actually believe that there may be a struggle in an area of your life if you are missing planets within a house, because the thought is that the planets are helping us. They're giving energy to assist us in that area of our chart. And so if you're missing a planet, that can mean that you don't have that extra assistance. That is not necessarily the case. And specifically in Western astrology and just pretty universally speaking, if you don't have planets within a specific house, it does not mean you're lacking in that area. It actually means that you don't need the extra assistance of a planet in that area. So I wanted to touch on the houses briefly just to let you know what that would typically mean. Also, before I get started, I wanted to mention that the term that's usually given to houses that do not have planets, they're called empty houses. Okay. Now, for the first house, that is the house of self. It's the house that has to do with our self-identity. And if you do not have any planets within that first house, then that essentially means that you don't have an issue with your self-awareness, with your identity, You are pretty just self-confident and just don't have any issues in that area. Okay. Now, the second house is our house of values and possessions, both material and otherwise. And for this house in particular, if you do not have any planets in it, it could mean that you either are not concerned with material acquisitions and possessions, or it could mean that they come to you easily, that you typically don't struggle or have to work too hard to obtain possessions, that you're pretty much straight in that area. Okay. Now, the third house is our house of communication. And for this house, if you don't have any planets in it, that typically means that you're a very strong and effective communicator, and that you don't struggle in that area. Essentially, you have ease in that area when it comes to communicating with others and interacting with others. Okay. Now, the fourth house, that's our house of our family and roots and our childhood, our upbringing, and typically someone who does not have any planets in the fourth house, they usually had a stable, solid childhood. So that's why the planets not being in that house worked in their favor. Now, the fifth house is the house of pleasure. It's the house of what we enjoy. And with regard to that house, if you don't have any planets in it, it means that there's ease in that area, and that you're pretty much satisfied with regard to the pleasure that you seek in your life. And the sixth house is our house of our health. Now, this is a house that, again, just like a few of the others, if you don't have any planets in that house, you typically have ease in this area. But this is a very positive sign if you don't have any planets in this house. You typically don't have any health issues and are pretty healthy overall, and pretty health conscious as well. The seventh house is our house of partnerships and relationships. And if you do not have any planets in this house, again, there's ease in this area, but it also could mean, like I said previously, that either you're not focused on that, or you typically have relationships come easily to you. You are one who is typically always kind of linked with someone, whether it's in a romantic manner or even in a platonic manner, or even casually, just always linked to someone if you don't have planets within the seventh house. The eighth house is a bit tricky. So if you do not have any planets in this house, the eighth house is our house of birth, death, including sex as well. And someone who does not have any planets in this house, that could mean that you are typically healthy overall, that you have pretty much a smooth coast throughout life with regard to your health, because formerly people would think that, well, does it mean that my life will be short because I don't have that extra energy? And this is the house of birth and death, but that's not the case. It could go either way. It could mean a life of disease, the opposite of ease, or it could mean that one has great ease throughout their life. Okay. Now, the ninth house is the house of our journeys, both traveling physically, also emotional journeys, and philosophy. And for this house, if you don't have any planets in it, that can mean that that's just not a focus for you. That travel, emotional attachments may not be a focus for you if you don't have planets in that house. Now, the 10th house, that's the house that involves our career. And someone who does not have planets in this house, Typically, like I said, for some of the other houses, they're just not so focused on their career. Their career does not define them. They may not be so focused on their career and acquiring a certain level of success in life that might not matter to this person if they don't have planets in the 10th house. Okay. Now, the 11th house, that's our house of friendships and social interactions. And if you don't have planets in this house, then that's typically someone where friends come easily to them. They don't really have to work hard or struggle to maintain friendships. Or like I said, and this is a bit of a trend, they're just not so focused on making those types of connections with people or socializing. So depending on some of the other placements in this individual's chart, um, it may look like it's leaning towards someone who is maybe mostly an introvert and is just not too interested in networking or socializing with others. Now, the 12th house is about secrets and mystery and mystique and the occult, also our subconscious. This house, similar to the 6th house, is one where it's actually considered pretty lucky to not have any planets in it. And that's because this one, it also involves our mental health. And if one does not have any planets in this particular house, it's a great sign because it typically means that they are mentally sharp, that they don't struggle with any type of mental health issues, and that there are no issues to work through. Typically, the planets that we have in the 12th house are planets that are there to help us to work through some some matters with our subconscious and with our mental state. And so if you don't have any planets there, then the concept is that you are not having any issues in that area. You won't have issues in that area. Now, obviously, this information is not just, mutually exclusive. There are other factors that weigh into things. I always talk about nature versus nurture. This is who we are at our core, but there are always external factors that could weigh in and could, make the difference in our lives, especially when we're looking at ourselves overall and not just these individual aspects. But I hope that this has been helpful. So I will be in touch with future videos. Thank you so much for joining me today. Peace. Ashe.